So, you want to answer the first question because you have to go?
Anyone else?
Yeah, please.
So my question is, I'm sorry for not being able to articulate in the best way, but I've seen, not necessarily rabbis say this, but I see skeptics believe that that this is what's communicated to them by rabbis that defend Judaism and proofs. And they get the message that they should go look into different religions, and they'll see that Judaism makes the most sense in terms of evidence. And my question basically, and I know we talked about this before, but my question basically is, how ideal is that, considering the fact that, let's say for example, the Rambam in Hilchot Avodah Zarah says that any hirurim of Avodah Zarah are an isur, not chas v'shalom kfira, but they're isur.
So, you know better than to take one line out of a book of 1,000 lines and to try to draw a conclusion from it. For example, the Rambam says in the laws of idol worship that you shouldn't read any of the books that deal with what the idol worshippers did. And yet, in the guide, he says he read all of the books on ancient idol worship. But not only that, let me ask you a question. Suppose someone's accused of idol worship and you bring him before the judges for a case. How would they settle the case if they don't know what constitutes idol worship? So obviously the judges have to know. And they are supposed to know. And the Gemara makes an exception for them. So when you say you're not supposed to do something, it's you're not supposed to do it unless certain conditions apply. And you have to look up what the conditions are, and maybe not the list won't be completed, what you see. Rabbi Yochanan said, you don't learn the law from general statements. And then he went on to say, so you have a Mishnah that says, all A's are B's except for PQR. And you think, well, they mentioned the exceptions, so that must be the end of the story. Yochanan says, no, there could be XYZ also that are exceptions. So, I know from experience that there are people who won't make a commitment unless they have the opportunity to check the alternatives. And, of course, any decision like that, you have to go to a person who's a responsible posek. But the answer has been, let them check the alternatives. Even when we've had boys here who said, I can't make a commitment to Torah unless I spend time in India. So we say, go to India. Our experience teaches us that if they go to India, they'll come back. Same thing with kibbutz. This is earlier on when kibbutz was all the rage. Now people know better. And can we go to kibbutz for Shabbat? Sure. By all means. We know they'll come back. And we tell them, by the way, when you're there, ask them how come they don't let their members come to us for a shir. They don't allow it. They forbid them, either formally or by social pressure. They don't allow it. Because they're afraid. We're not afraid. We know that we have the truth. We know that we're able to communicate. So if there are people for whom there are only two alternatives, stay non-religious for the rest of your life, or go to India and then come to us, going to India and coming to us is the better alternative. But you need a das Torah for that. I'm just telling you that to rule it out on the grounds of one 4-word line in the Rambam is not satisfactory. There are a lot more considerations than that. I'll give you one more example, which will... If it shocks you, we have smelling salts here. There was a 14-year-old girl who wrote to one of the Gottleib 50 years ago, I've decided to keep Shabbos, and my parents told me, in our home, you will not keep Shabbos. What should I do? So, of course, you know the halacha. The halacha is your parents can't tell you not to keep Shabbos. He said, don't keep Shabbos. Wait until you're independent. Because if you set up a war between a 14-year-old girl and her parents are going to win. And then she's going to be lost entirely. I saw it when I was in college. We had a small group of students who were interested in Yiddishkeit and so forth and so on. And there was one boy who became interested. His parents found out. They took him out for a year. They sent him to a psychiatrist. When he came back, he was totally lost. Totally lost. He couldn't talk to him. So you have to be realistic about that and think, what does the Kodesh Baruch Hu want? Does one person want me to obey this rule and lose the guy's neshama? Maybe not. Maybe yes, maybe no. But it's not open and shut. It's not open and shut. That's the message that I have to give you. Yeah, who's up?
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
So I like the answer a lot. I just wanted to add. It seems like if there, from what the Rabbi was saying, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is a way to communicate to a person to be able to keep the mitzvot and not have to go through a derech of maybe breaking this law on face value, then that would be better.
Yeah, of course. But look, I wrote my book, Reason to Believe, and I did a lot of research on other religions, some of which is in the book, and some of which is on my website because I had 450 pages worth of material, and the publisher told me they're publishing up to 300 pages, which they did. So it's there, and I did all, and it's all in public domain. And I invite people to read. You want to read about Christianity, you want to read about Buddhism, you want to read about Islam. I have it there from their sources, and I have the ways to answer them. So, and I have haskamas in my sefer. So it's not as if that this is something which is a foreign idea. Some people need to know at least that I read them, and then I can explain them to them, so that I'm not coming from a position of ignorance. That's enough for many readers. I have a full biography there. They can open the books themselves and take a look and see what I wrote.
It just seems like the Isur. It seems like the exceptions to the Isur are cases where there's no havamina that the person reading them would come to the thought that they might be true. Like for example, when Pirkei Avot says that you have.
You can't tell that. The Kohen Gottleib became a tzduki when he was 80 years old. Acher was a great scholar, and he came to deny things. You can never guarantee that a person won't change his mind, be misled or seduced by something that overwhelms him. Acher was a great scholar, and he came to deny to the hashgacha.
Of course, but if I'm not mistaken, it seems like the heterim are there if you're doing it for the sake of defending Judaism, for the sake of getting knowledge. So I'm saying, Masha'en can a person that's reading it with a complete havamina that it might be true, just as true as Judaism is. I just don't know what's true yet.
But you're just. The mentality of the person who's explaining Yiddishkeit and other religions is that Yiddishkeit is true and the other religions are false, and I'm going to show you why. But the listener's mentality isn't that mentality. The listener's mentality is, I don't know what's true and I don't know what's false, and the speaker knows who he's speaking to. He's speaking to someone with a different mentality. The point of it is to communicate with a person whose mentality is, I don't know what's true and I don't know what's false, and I'm trying to find out. So what difference does it make what the speaker's mentality is? We're talking about a person who's investigating what's appropriate for him to read, and he doesn't have any preconditions.
I just one last question on that. So that's great. My question is just this: once a person, thank you so much for clarifying around. But once a person who gets past that first step and they realize, yes, Judaism is more probable than not, and now I'm going to start keeping the Torah because I got whatever justification that I need. How do they go to the next level of understanding the idea that looking at all these sources, right, understanding the idea that in retrospect what they did, at least according to Jewish law, was not justified.
Not true. Not true. Yeah, I know you're like it's like oil and water. You say it's nice, and you say it's a good thing, but you're not hearing at all what's going on. It was right. It was correct. That's like saying after the person drove to the hospital on Shabbos and they saved his life, he should realize that it was wrong to drive to the hospital on Shabbos. So he didn't obey, he did something wrong. How does he deal with that? He doesn't deal with that. He was right to drive to the hospital on Shabbos because he needed to save his life. He needed to make that investigation. It was right for him to make the investigation. The statement that you don't read those books doesn't apply to everybody in all conditions. I've said that to me. That's the same thing I've said each time. Each time you say you got it, but you're not getting it. You're not accepting it. You're saying the Rambam says don't read them. It's always wrong for everybody to read them, no matter what. Even the Sanhedrin that has to pass on a shayla should clap chait afterwards and say we shouldn't have read it because we're not allowed to read it. It's just not true. Sanhedrin has to read it.
Of course, yeah. I'm sorry for not understanding. When understanding that what he did was not ideal, or it would have been ideal for him to not.
That's first of all, it's an entirely different statement from what you said before. It's not ideal. When can you claim that you were required to do the ideal if you weren't prepared for it? It wasn't the ideal for somebody else who was in a different condition, a different mental set, a different background. Sure, that's right. If I had been him, then it would have been appropriate for you to do that. But it was ideal for him to do it. It was ideal for him to do it because there was no other way for him. So it was ideal.
His understanding was that it was ideal for everyone, not that it was ideal for him.
Well, I don't know about that. Who we're talking about the listener now? The seeker thinks that it's ideal for everybody? He's misled about everything. He doesn't know what Shabbos is, he doesn't know what Kasha is, and he doesn't know what investigation is. He's misled. Just making a mistake.
Now the
rabbi's not misled, because he understands that this is not for everybody, it's just for people for whom there's no other way.
But the perception of Judaism that this person came to is that I'm following Judaism because Judaism is more probable than not.
Yes.
Well, at the same time, the Rambam and all the Rishonim and all the Amoraim and all the Tanaim, all of them, for whatever reason, thought Judaism was 100% true and had no havamina that I was wrong at all. And this person is under the impression that I'm justified because it's more probable than not, and that it's completely fine for me to think that it might be false, right? Yet the Rambam says it's not fine to think that it might be false.
Well, that's after a certain extent of education. That's just said, and a certain extent of experience. This person may never get to the point where it's reasonable for him to say there's no harmony that's false. He wasn't brought up in a firm home. He never saw tzaddikim. He never learned when he was a child what real learning is. His learning is artificial and superficial, probably to the end of his life. So in his case, there's nothing more that he can do. He's onus. And a person's onus is doesn't clap al chait. You don't do tshuva for what you're onus on. You did the best that could be expected of you. That's all. Okay, enough. We've been through it enough times. Yeah. Who's up?
I have another question, yes.
You do?
Not yet.
No, okay.
Rav's spoken before about an 80-20 list, and I find that as I'm growing in my practice and faith, or whatever you want to call it, I'm taking on, not everything, and recently, but I'm taking on more, and I find that I don't have enough to juggle everything. So, obviously the Deroises need to be on the 20 list, and the Rabbanut, Minhagim, I'm just kind of like putting to the side, but if you give me some guidance on how to approach it, that would be helpful.
Okay, so I the way I do this, and I'm the kabbalah from my Rabbi and from Rosh Yeshiva, it's not a question of what's legally more important. It's a question of what will promote the ideal development in starting from where you are. A person can ask, I'm giving an extreme case, a person says, I'm trying to decide whether to keep Shabbos or make brachos. Well, Shabbos is one of the Aseres Dibros, and it's sort of deraisen. If you do it deliberately with warning, it's violated, then it's Chai Misa. And the brachos, one is deraisen, all the rest are the Rabbanan. The right answer might be brachos. You can't decide it on legal grounds. You can decide on psychological grounds. For one thing, brachos could be absolutely private. No one has to know you're making brachos. Shabbos is a gigantic change in your behavior, and your family and your friends are going to come down, and you're going to be accused of being a fanatic and so on and so on, and you might not make it. So if the question of what will lead to the best long-term development, the answer is not always given in legal terms. This is something which is axiomatic. So you say you're having trouble juggling it. It's a good perception. Now, I don't know if I gave it to you. I don't know if you were here when I said it or not. But my suggestion is when you take on something new, you say explicitly in your mind, I'm experimenting with this. I'm going to see if I can handle it. And if I can handle it means a bottom line evaluation after a month, whether the sum total of what you do is improved or not. If you make it, can I do this, and you don't realize there's a cost to doing this, and you can lose out on doing other things, and maybe the sum total is a loss rather than a gain, then you're not making the right evaluation. You have to make a sum total evaluation. And then if it doesn't work, you say, look, I said I was making an experiment. I made the experiment. I'll draw the conclusion. I'll try it again in a year. Because right now I'm not ready for it. Right now I can't handle it. We had a guy here, this was many years ago. He was in a summer program somewhere. And he went from being completely fried, coming out with a suit and a hat and a tie and the shoes and the shadayim with a two-handled cup and everything else. And he came to Ohr Somayach to learn. And in January he said, I'm praying 3 times a day. I don't know if there's anybody there listening. Because he picked up the behaviors and the clothes. But the ideas came more slowly. And the commitment came more slowly. And then he realized, I'm doing all this, and I'm feeling that, and my brain is over there. I'm out of sync with myself. I'm coming apart. I'm not a whole person anymore. That wasn't a good experience. That wasn't a good experience. We had a guy here, this was going back 40 years, who had a ponytail. And you can have a ponytail, and you can wear beads, and you can wear earrings in your ears. You can do whatever you want. And after 6 months, he cut it off, and we said, he's probably too soon. He probably took it off too soon. He didn't make it. So another guy here with an earring, and he also, after some period of months, took it off, and we were worried, and we found out that he heard a shmooze from Rav Mendel Weinbach about Eved Nirtza, that the slave is, if he decides to stay forever, they put a hole in his ear. And he thought, I don't want to have a hole in my ear. I don't want to be like that. So he thought, okay, he heard a Torah idea. And he understood, he didn't want to be in that position, and he made it. And he made it well. But they say, well, sure, we take off a ponytail. Isn't that a step forward? No, but maybe a terrible step backward, and you may lose everything for it. Things are not simple. They're not boiled down to, how to make a muffin. It's not like that. So I think it's good periodically to stop and think, where was I? How am I doing? For example, I put in an extra hour of learning, but I'm exhausted when it comes to Maariv, and I can't pay attention to Shema. Well, then you're not necessarily gaining. You're not necessarily gaining.
Well, what makes, Shema is more important than learning on maybe a legal level? He's got to have to make that hush bond.
So I think that let's see if I can give you an analogy to this. Is it more important to have strong muscles or to be able to put the ball through the hoop? So put the ball through the hoop. That's how you win basketball games, right? Why don't you spend all your time just putting the ball through the hoop? Because if you don't invest in your muscles systematically, you won't be able to put the ball through the hoop. So you spend a lot of time not putting balls through the hoop. So it's in order, in the end, to be the best you can be at putting balls through the hoop.
So I should clarify what my goal is, what I want to have Judy.
And don't be small-minded about what the training for the goal is. Let's think. Here's a serious question, which I was never able to convince the yeshiva to set as a policy: taking off time to learn Hebrew. I don't mean how to order hamburgers in a store. I mean basic grammar and basic vocabulary and basic structure and so forth and so on. Taking off time 3 months to, let's say, 3 hours a day to learn Hebrew. But that's 3 hours a day for 3 months. That's dozens and dozens of hours you didn't learn Torah. That's true. Dozens and dozens of hours you didn't learn Torah. But guess what? For the next 60 years, you'll learn twice as much Torah as you would have learned. I know from experience. It happened to me. And other people that I've talked to. So I say, you're trading off an investment to a long-term gigantic gain. And by the way, you could say the same thing about Gemara, because learning Gemara is very hard, and a lot of times you don't get it. And when you do get it, you probably get it wrong. You probably don't get it correctly. Wouldn't it be better just to read books with information in English, which you will remember and you'll use? Halacha. Right away. Why do you spend 5 hours a day in Gemara? Why shouldn't you be learning what to do to serve the Eibishter? The answer is that you're investing in your educational abilities, which will multiply how much you'll be able to learn and understand throughout your lifetime. So you don't spend all your time learning the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in English. You don't do that. Things aren't simplistic that way. They're subtle, they're complicated, and they depend on a person's psychology. So, as I say, an evaluation from time to time, and it may be that the extra learning isn't worth being able to daven Maariv with, because then you go to sleep with a different mental attitude. You feel better about yourself, and so on and so on. There are so many different things that are going on here. I can only tell you that we go to poskim. There was one fellow who was taken to Rav Shach. He was about Tshuva. He came not to our yeshiva, to a different yeshiva. He did very well. He promised his parents after a year in yeshiva, he would go back to university. And after the year, it was spring already. He wanted to stay another year in yeshiva. He went to Rav Shach. Well, of course, he said, stay in yeshiva. God will take care of the consequences, and it'll all be good, and you'll go to all of my book. No, he said, go back and go to university, because you promised your parents, and in your case, in your specific circumstances, it's better to keep your promise and not stay in yeshiva. Things aren't simplistic one-liners in a Rambam. That's not the way these decisions are made. To have a broad. I remember Rav Shach, there's a sefer about his comments about Kiruv, very close to my Rebbe's. My Rebbe was a Hasidic. One guy's daughter got involved in wrong things. She's going to the army. Her father said, in 2 weeks she's going to the army. I want to make an absolute tonight that I will not support her and I'll not have any unless she goes to a Kiruv seminar this Shabbos. And Rav Shach said, no, don't do that. Well, it's Kiruv and it's Torah, and she'll spend time in Torah before she goes to the army, and the Kedusha will hold her on. No, it won't. It'll mean her father's imposing his will on her, and she's not being treated as a responsible adult, and she will never listen to him again. So I'm giving the explanation, but he said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. A boy's running out of yeshiva for night seder, and they tell the Rosh Yeshiva he's going to do to movies or whatever it is, right? So the Rosh Yeshiva says, tell me the next time you see him go out. It was wintertime. So they said, we saw him go out. Rosh Yeshiva went home and got his overcoat and met the boy and said, I don't want you to be cold. Take my coat. To your movie! Take my coat. Is that right? Helping him? Be Messiah over Avera, giving the wrong impression? Where's your idealism? No, take my coat to the movie. Things are not simplistic. Things are not simplistic. He's a Gottleib Ador. Okay, next question. Yeah.
If someone has had a break in their observance within their family and they're Baal Teshuvah and now they've come back to Judaism observance, Jewish observance, how do they choose the most appropriate tradition that they now adopt for their, kind of restart in observance within their family?
That's a very good question. First of all, you're making the right assumption that there's no responsibility, even when there's no break in observance, there's no responsibility of a child to follow the customs of his father or a girl the customs of her mother. There's no such idea. Indeed, in the Gemara in Pesachim it says that if you move to a new community, you take on the laws and customs of that community. Not, you don't keep your parents. We had two cases with Rav Scheinberg. One was a boy who came from Texas and became about tshuva. They checked his parentage and went back to Lita, but he felt that the Lithuanian learning style was very dry, and it wasn't inspiring to him, and he was more inspired by connection with Hasidic davening and certain Hasidic learning and so forth and so on. They went to Rav Scheinberg and said, become a chassid. So another boy whose grandfather went from Poland to Morocco, and his father went from Morocco to Montreal, and he's part of the Sephardi community there, and he knows that his grandfather came from Poland, right? So they came to Rav Scheinberg and said, should I go back to the Polish, my Polish answer says, I'm sorry, with the boy who came from Texas, his grandfather was from Lita, right, from Lita. And here he said, absolutely not. Stay with the Sephardim that you have in Montreal. So in one case he said go back to the grandfather, and the other case he didn't go, said not to go back to the grandfather. So why? Because you have no responsibility to go back to your grandfather. The only exception, Rav Moshe Zatshuva, where you have a whole community, whole city that has certain customs, then certain survivors after the Holocaust wrote to him, we are the group that remains from that city. Are we required to keep the customs of that city? He said, yes, because you represent that city. But that's a city's issue. That's not your ancestors' issue. So you're not required to keep it. If you feel more comfortable in a different community, more inspired, more understood, more integrated in a different community. I have two sons who are not Hasidic at all, and they are tzaddikim. I have one chassid son who is a chassid, and then he's also a tzaddik. And you can't have an ego investment in there, following your the footsteps of the particular methodology you have for serving Kodesh Baruch Hu. There were 12 tribes. Each tribe had different characteristics. Yisachar and Zvulun, and Zvulun was put before Yisachar because they supported Zvulun, Yisachar, and they got credit for doing that. The Rizal said that every tribe had its own siddur. They had a different siddur. There are different ways of serving the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So I don't think there's any way to now. What we do here, I would say, it's like a kind of straddling of the line. This is a Litvish yeshiva, except for a token chassid like me and a couple of token Sephardim. But basically, it's a Litvish yeshiva. But what we teach here is what every Jew has to know. We don't teach specialized stuff. We don't make you learn Nefesh Chaim and go down that particular route. You have to know Gemara, and you have to know Shulchan Aruch, and you have to be able to read the Chumash and read and the Siddur, and you have to know basic Jewish beliefs and so forth and so on. That's hopefully the education you're getting here will be useful and relevant, no matter which particular methodology you end up following. That's the idea. We're filling in the gaps that everybody has there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Before he asked the question, Rabbi didn't mention more Navichem as a source, as the Rambam himself proved all these riots from places that are not the.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. He was talking about methodology of cure for people who aren't in, and they are questioning, and they are thinking maybe it's true, maybe it's false. The Rambam wrote his Vuchin for a Talmud who wasn't like that at all. he had problems of understanding, and he knew he had problems of understanding. It's like when you have a stira in the Gemara. That's not because you don't have a lack of trust that the Gemara is true and so forth and so on. You just don't understand what it means, how to deal with it. And here he had steers that he was dealing with, and Rabbi wanted to answer up those steers. So it's not clear there that he's. But when you asked the question before, you asked it well. I mean, the Rambam says in the Mishnah Torah, "Asal halas hadas." Now, of course, that's like poetry. Don't bring it up on your mind that, let's say, idol worship is true. What does that mean? Bring it up on your mind. What is we're supposed to conclude? Don't consider proofs for and against, because while you're considering a proof for and against, you're thinking about it. So you shouldn't think about it. That's surely wrong. The Rambam spent lots and lots of time thinking about it, and so did Chazal. Chazal talked about Avodah Zorah and explained what Avodah Zorah is, and explained the ways in which what penalties it has, and all the rest. So certainly that's not right. No, what the Rambam meant was to have as a possibility in your mind that it might be right and Torah might be wrong. This is I'll give you an example of what this is like. You'll see a world that has 3 dimensions, right? Now, I don't know if you ever reflected on the fact that your retina is flat. So your retina is only 2 dimensions. So how does a 2-dimensional screen record a 3-dimensional space? How does it do that? Seems like it's not rich enough to capture the 3rd dimension because it itself doesn't have a 3rd dimension. This was a problem in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. They could not explain how visual perception takes place. No one thought that we're all making a mistake and the world has 2 dimensions. Nobody thought that. What they thought is, we have a puzzle here. We're doing it and we cannot explain how we do it. Then was a guy named Gibson who did some fundamental work. He found out how the 2-dimensional screen picks up the symptoms of the 3-dimensional reality. And painters know this also. They use it when you have a flat canvas, it looks like it has a depth, right? You know it doesn't, by the way they do photographs now, you could swear that there's depth there. You put your hand on it and think, how come it's flat? You can see by the shading that, this is on top of that, and this is closer to you than that. So they know how to do that. So here too, the idea was, I know this is true, I just can't see how to answer this kasha. So then you're not really taking seriously that there's that it's not true. It's just I don't know how to explain why it's true. So that kind of investigation is for sure what is done. And by the way, I have on my blog, I think it's on the blog, that sources of those who say that if you just accept your belief system from the tradition, that's inferior. And those sources include the Chovos Levovos, of course, everybody that's famous, but the Shloh HaKadosh quotes the Chovos Levovos word for word, and the Maharsha in Brachos says it, and the Mabit says it, and who else did I find? A bunch of Rishonim and Achronim who say that it's better if you investigate and you can establish these things on the basis of your own reasoning and understanding than just the Rambam says it straight out. Than just accepting on the basis of tradition. The Rambam says that Moshe Rabbeinu was Adon HaChachamim, the greatest of the wise. Not just Adon HaNevi'im, the greatest of the prophets, but the greatest of the wise. So you think, I don't understand that. Doesn't it say that Shlomo HaMelech was the Yechka Mikol Adam? Yeah, it does. The Rambam quotes the pasuk, but then it goes on to say, including 3 people in his own generation. If it's everybody, past, present, and future, why mention those 3 people? It means because we're talking about the people in his generation. But the Rambam says that Moshe Rabbeinu was Adon HaChachamim. I wonder where he got that from. Maybe from Aristotle? No, not likely. It's a Gemara Megillah, thank you. The Gemara Megillah that says that Moshe Rabbeinu was Adon HaNevi'im, Adon b'Nevuah, Adon b'Torah, and Adon b'Chachma. So the Gemara is telling me Torah and Chachma aren't the same thing. How about that? And that Moshe Rabbeinu was Adon b'Chachma. So what is Chachma? The Rambam says Chachma is the ability to prove or argue for the things that you received from tradition. And this is what Eov meant when he said at the end of the Sefer, up until now, Shamati, or I heard you with my ear, but now I see with my eye. And now I understand. He says, hearing with the ear is receiving for tradition, but now I can see why it's true. I can see how it's true, and now I repent of what I said before. It was all wrong, it was a mistake, and now I understand better what needs to be done. So the idea of analyzing and coming to conclusions with reasoning that you understand is something which many Sholim Achronim say is superior. Not to say that doing it on the basis of tradition alone is wrong or bad or insufficient, but it's superior. It adds a dimension which the Torah would want you to have.
This may be incorrect, but isn't it a mark of the confidence in the veracity of the Torah to encourage investigation so long as it's done with a sincere pursuit of truth? Because of the idea that you will ultimately come to the destination where many of the are at. If you're coming at it with a sincere pursuit, you're going to end up at the correct destination.
I think it's a good remark. Of course, there has to be. I just had this now. Somebody asked me about his Talmidim who are 16 years old. They want to make an investigation. They want to see whether it's really true or isn't true, and so on and so on. And he asked me what to say to them, and I say, to ask them, how many investigations have you already made in your lifetime into the reality of molecules or cosmology or medicine? You've read sources on both sides, and you can check with experts, and you analyzed and debated it and came to a conclusion. How many investigations have you made? Of course, the answer is 0. What makes you think you're capable of making any investigation? Were you trained in making investigations? You think this is a summer project, in between swims in the lake? I mean, maybe you don't realize what you're taking on. Maybe you don't realize, let alone the fact that you're fighting battles with your parents, and which is going to make you totally subjective about it. There's a guy here, it's a terrible case. Father's a doctor, and his oldest son went off. He called me up, and he said he went off because of something called, he's in university here, something called Gottleib syndrome. And that's why he went off. I said, send it to me. I wrote my doctoral thesis on Gottleib syndrome, so I know it pretty well. It has absolutely nothing to do with Yiddishkeit at all. You might just talk about making sand statues, and that's the reason to go off Yiddish. So I said to him, tell me what you think Gottleib syndrome says. And after I corrected him a few times, I said, okay, now you tell me, what's that got to do with Shabbos? What's that got to do with Matan Torah? What's that got to do with anything Yiddish? And he mumbled, and he fumbled, and he fumbled, and he mumbled. I said, listen, you like cheeseburgers? Be honest. Tell your father you like cheeseburgers. Or you like snorkeling on Shabbos? Be honest. Tell your father you like snorkeling. Don't try to use girdle. That's stupid. It's stupid. It's childish. It's a lie, because your father hasn't heard of him, and he won't be able to gather the information himself. So you use the name to cower him, to cow him and to make him feel embarrassed. Grow up to the point where you have enough self-confidence to be honest with yourself. I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but that's the kind of thing which you're inviting when you say, person, if he just wants to find the truth, he may think he wants to find the truth, it may not be true. So you have to be very, very careful about that. But I tell you, when I was making my investigation, the honesty of the tradition in presenting things, which, if I were writing a tradition and trying to impress people and trying to make sure that it would have an effect, I would never have put in. First of all, how many times does a sugya end with the word kasha? There's an objection made to the established position, and the Gemara says we have no answer to that objection. I would leave that out. I wouldn't admit that we can't answer questions that are critiques of our. And how about Tiyufta? This Amora said something. We found a brisa against him. We say he's refuted by the brisa. He's wrong, and as Tosfos points out, because we assume he didn't know the brisa. And if he would have known the brisa, he would have changed his mind. So therefore, we say he's wrong. So he's ignorant and wrong. I wouldn't have put that in. I would have made our sages perfect. I would have made them without any fault whatsoever. Do Chazal ever make mistakes? Yes. Trick question. Yes. Proof. Because they themselves say they make mistakes. Totally beyond the Rava says. What I said yesterday was wrong. I made a mistake. The halakha is the opposite. Well, at least one of them's wrong. They can't both be right. So this admission of being human and not divine, this admission of making mistakes, this registering of unanswered questions, to me was very refreshing. Nobody's protecting anything here. Nobody's hiding anything here. If the story of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, how Reish Lakish died and how Rabbi Yochanan died, I would never allow that in my version of the Talmud. It raises all sorts of questions and how they felt about one another and how they reacted to things that were tragic and so on and so on. Yeah, okay, that's what happened. That's what really happened, and we put it in because these were great people, and this is what happened to them. So I found that very refreshing, in exactly the same way. So it's very convincing that this is something where the truth is what really matters, and we're not trying to make impressions on people. We're not coloring it to influence people. No, it's candid. I was very happy about that. Yeah.
How does one know what Hashem when it comes to eating kosher? Firstly, I would like the Rabbi to go through why we eat kosher, and then what are Hashem and how do we learn what we should take on upon ourselves?
I'll tell you, this is an individual decision. Now, why keep kosher? Because there are mitzvahs in the Torah which tell you that what things to eat and when things not to eat. And there are many additional laws that the Rabbanan made, which they have every right, authority, and responsibility to make. And we're bound to follow all of them. Now, there are at least two issues when you're talking about choosing a hashgacha, or several. I mean, we eat from three different hashgarim, so the question of choosing one. One is the particular halachic rules that they use, and they vary from case to case. For example, there's a rule in foods called bittul. If a forbidden substance gets into a mixture with other things, there are conditions under which it does not affect the mixture, and the mixture is perfectly permissible to use. Some hashgarim don't use that rule. They say if anything forbidden got in, even though the Torah says that it's permissible, we don't allow it. Not that they're disagreeing with the Torah, chas v'shalom. The Torah says it's allowable, but we don't allow our stores to sell things where that has happened. Why? Because if you do it here, it may be done over there. People might not judge it correctly. We want to make sure that this is off the page. Others don't. They say the halacha is that it's permissible. We're just following the halacha. That's a question of standards. The other question is of realistic supervision. Realistic supervision is very, very tricky. I have a son who works for the Ada. He traveled the world doing inspections, and now he works in the administration of the Ada. And you have to know psychology, and you have to know economics, and you have to know the local culture. There are certain places in the world where they'll lie to you about everything without thinking twice. Whatever they say, it could be a lie. Don't trust anything they say. He had a case where he was surveying a plant and seeing whether it could be made kosher, and the son of the manager of the plant took my son aside and said, "Look here on the floor. You see that ring? That opens up to an underground pipe. My father won't tell you, but that's where it is." If he hadn't told my son, I don't know how anybody would have known. So lots of things. He found baskets full of stamps, kosher stamps, which they had taken away from the ones that were used for the product and kept them because, maybe later in the year they'll want to sell one and they'll put more stamps on. All sorts of things like that happen. You have to have a good backup. You have to have support, and you have to be willing to take a hit. The rule that he was told was, you see something that's funny, say thank you very much and leave. Don't give any explanations, and we'll take them off our list. That's all. In addition to having 24/6 access to poskim, whenever a question comes up, you get an instant answer. So some have this kind of elaborate setup, and some don't. Some have more, some have it in some areas, and not in other areas. Some are very good at fish. The Ada checks every fish. Every fish that's canned, every tuna, right? They have people there checking every fish. So Is that absolutely necessary? I don't know enough about the kashrus to say so. I would imagine that checking every 10th fish would be okay. They don't do it that way. So it depends upon where you want to put your emphasis in kashrus, what kind of standards. I know my Rebbe's brother, only ate from food that was prepared in his house. He only, when he personally knew the shoftim. I knew somebody in Muncie, who he only ate what he saw the shechita. And he took the meat. Right? There was a terrible tragedy in Muncie about 10 years ago. A certain purveyor of meat was purveying for many years wrong meat. He wasn't caught. Because he had the standard and he only took them. Do you have to do that? No, you don't have to do that. But he did that. So there are different identifications with this mitzvah and wanting to have a higher standard in this mitzvah, and that's perfectly appropriate, perfectly admissible. And then people's standards vary. So I don't think there's any law to be laid down. It should be this way, it should be that way. Yeah.
You mentioned a few times last time also his Rebbe. I don't know what the Rebbe was, and if Rebbe could say something about him.
My Rebbe was the Boston Rebbe, of Boston, Massachusetts, Levi Yitzchak Horowitz. He was Makar of me, and he was Makar of hundreds of people. He, like many Gottleib, he did not have a formula. Each person got personal attention and personal direction, and different people went in different directions because he saw their potential and he saw what was what was important for them. When I gave his Spadim for him when he was nifta 13 years ago, I take it upon myself to point out things that not everybody knows, the things that get overlooked. He was a gigantic Baal Chesed. He ran a hospital service with housing and support and communication and transportation. People came from Israel and couldn't speak English, so he had translators for them. He knew the doctors personally, and they gave awards to the doctors who helped. The doctors waived their fees. He put kosher food in the hospitals. He made the bakeries kosher, and he made the mikveh in Boston. I mean, they set up a school for boys in Boston. He did a lot of that. He put out his own version of the Siddur, the Yeshivat Siddur, which he had from his father. But he was also very smart. When I gravitated to him, this was in 1962, one person who davened there had a PhD in physics, and one person there was a professor of sociology, and another person there was a mathematician working for the army. These were people with first-class secular educations, and they were devoted to him. So, coming from a university where they just spit on everything that's traditional, I thought, wait a minute, I'm an undergraduate. Boy, it'd be nice if I got a PhD. But these guys had PhDs, so, it's got to be something there. So I used to talk to them, and I used to talk to the Rabbi, and whatever background you came from, whatever you learned, you spoke to the Rabbi, he understood you. He understood you, and he could say something that was relevant and insightful to whatever you were doing. I was trained in philosophy and mathematics. And these people were amazed that whatever you spoke to him, there was something insightful. And when I asked him questions about Torah, which I'm sure he didn't hear from anybody else, and he had answers that were first class, and he was, I know to me, for example, when I was first becoming frum, I thought, gee, for bread, you bench, and for steak and potatoes, it's a one-liner, brain of flushes. So I resolved, whenever I have steak and potatoes, I'll have a slice of bread, and I'll bench, because, isn't it right to bench when you have a slice of bread? So I'll have a slice of bread, and I'll bench. And I was proud of this, my sensitivity and willing to, go the extra mile. I said it to the Rebbe, and I expected a pat on the back. He said, no, you're doing this because you think there's an imbalance, that there should be 3 paragraphs of benching for bread and 1 liner for a steak. The Torah didn't say that. Go back and research it to find out why the Torah is right. He didn't give me the easy pat on the back. No. He understood I was looking for the emes, And he said, you know, what you're doing is not emes. It's nice, but it's not emes. So he was very tough in those days. He once told me something. I said, Rabbi, why didn't you tell me this earlier? He said, you wouldn't have accepted. So at first I was hurt. I was insulted. I thought about it for a couple of months, and I realized he was right. I wouldn't have been able to hear it. I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. So I wouldn't have accepted it. He was straight. I'll tell you one more story about it. My first wife was a social worker, and she asked him what he. At his Shabbos table, the last 20 years of his life, he had 50 people, 10 of whom were dying. They were in the hospital and they got away out. So she asked him, and he made decisions for them. She said, "How do you sleep at night? How do you deal with it? People come to you with all tragedies and problems." And so she asked him this question. It was afternoon, and he said, "Look, you're right. There's a lot of pressure, and you're right. There's a lot of emotion, but you manage. You say, tell them whatever he said." He said, "Fine." The next morning, he called at 7 a.m. Let me speak to my wife. He said, "I don't know why I told you what I said to you. I was up all night. I couldn't sleep. I had this problem and that problem. I don't know why I said it to you." That's a Rebbe. That's a Rebbe. Not wearing a golden kaftan so you can lick his feet. He said something. He realized that he didn't portray himself correctly. He created a false impression. So he called up and he said, "I shouldn't have said that." And then the other one, we got a call one Friday morning. We called him and he called us. We were very close. He called. I answered the call, and he said, "Let me speak to your wife." Not hello, how are you? Have a good job? Nothing. Let me speak to your wife. So I put her on. And he says to her, "Are you all right?" She says, "Yeah." "Are you sure you're all right?" She said, "Yeah, I think so. Fine." He says, "Okay, have a good Shabbos." She turns to me. "What happened? What's going on?" On Sunday, she had a miscarriage. One call in 47 years. Don't tell me he got it right by accident. One call like that in 47 years. 47. And we know that when you have a miscarriage, that the baby dies 24 to 48 hours before. Something happened and he felt it. And he felt he had to call. So we had a long, I was with him for 47 years. Long and, get me started, I can go on and on. To see him do a mitzvah, to see the love with which he did a mitzvah. He kissed the Lulav and Esrog goodbye at the end of Sukkot. He kissed the schach, climbed up on a ladder to kiss the walls of the sukkah. And then he went into Simchas Torah. We made Shema Tzeres, we make it Gafas also, even in Chutz La'aretz. To see that, see him at Kiddush Friday night, I had the feeling over and over again, I was there maybe 100 times Friday night, that every Kiddush Friday night, that's the last Kiddush. Not that he isn't going to live till next week, but this night's Kiddush is never coming back. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Only now will you do this night's Kiddush. That's the way he did it. It's precious, and it'll never come back. It's a one-time thing. You see that enough times, you come to respect mitzvahs more. You come to identify with mitzvahs more. And nothing he did was to show off. He said l'shem yichud. I know it's l'shem yichud now before Kiddush, but he mumbled it. Didn't say it out loud. So one time, the first wife said to him, "Rabbi, what do you say before Kiddush?" He said, "Something." She said, "I know that. What is it?" "Oh, you want to know what it is?" So he explained it to her in simplistic terms. It's a Kabbalistic formula, which the Sephardim say regularly, and some Ashkenazim, especially Hasidim, do say. And but he didn't advertise it. He didn't ask anybody else to do it. He lived his avodah. That's all. You want to share with my avodah? You're welcome to share with my avodah. What you should do? He was very reluctant to tell people what to do, to push them. He didn't. When I came to him, I davened Nusach Ashkenaz, Havaras Faradit, and I wore sandals without socks, and a kippah suga. So what? You want to come? You're welcome. You want to come for the Suda? You're welcome. That's just a peek. There's a wonderful sefer that came about his life from New York, a famous author, about 3 3 years ago. I can't remember his name, but it was quite a good sefer. And Chanach Teller has a book on him from many years ago. Probably was across the street. Okay, I have to go upstairs and teach.